Hello, and welcome to Nomadic Diaries, the ReEntry Series. I'm Doreen Cumberford, the host.
And I'm Linda Mueller, the co-host.
Today on Nomadic Diaries Repatriation Series, it is my great pleasure to be continuing the conversation with Helen Ellis, who is the expert in distance grandparenting relationships. Helen, thank you for coming today and to talk to us just for a bit about the subject of repatriation.
Thanks, Doreen. It's just fantastic to be here, and it's a great topic to talk about.
Yeah, it's really important, isn't it? So tell me, have you ever had a son or daughter repatriate?
That's a good question. No, I actually haven't. Oh, no, actually, technically I have, yes. My stepdaughter did come back from Scotland, and it was a long time ago. It was over 20 years ago. That's why I've temporarily forgotten about it. And her Scottish husband lived back here. It was quite traumatic because they put all their possessions, including their Mercedes car, in a container, and someone didn't close the door properly.
Oh, no.
And when they opened it, everything was soggy with seawater because the container had been sitting on top. So I can see that day so clearly. I can see my granddaughter in a playpen while they were in tears, dealing with everything. So I remember that occasion, absolutely. But I've observed some of them with grandparents and that I know, other families
and friends, yes,
and friends, and I've observed it, and I have a real appreciation of what they're going through because of my research and my books, etc. But what I do know is most of the time the locals don't. They just have no concept. They just think, well, especially someone coming back to New Zealand, because New Zealand's supposed to be the most exotic, wonderful place in the world. Well, naturally you come back home to where everybody wants to come to, so you must be so happy. But no, it's not the case, and it's very confusing, and it's hard and it's difficult. So even coming back to somewhere that everybody wants to come to is not necessarily easy.
You and I have had a previous conversation on the subject of the general subject of grandparenting at a distance. And one of the things you talked about was the gaps. Can you speak a little bit about the gaps that occur in the midst of repatriation?
Yes, this is the gaps of the conversations that should have happened over the kitchen table, but they didn't because the parents and grandparents back home are so excited that they're coming home, or maybe a little bit, maybe not quite sure, how it's going to be. They may be a little bit unsure themselves how it's going to be for them. But the ones who are returning home are in the middle of sorting out end of school year and sorting out what's, what they're going to pack and
logistics,
new jobs and all that sort of thing. Yeah. And I think that the gaps are that the people back home don't realize that the ones coming home aren't really sure about all of this. And one half of it, maybe a couple, may be super excited, can't wait to get home, yippee, yippee, yippee. And the other one was really quite happy where they were.
Yes.
And they're coming home because their mother or father isn't well and they feel they need to, or maybe the children are now at high school age and they feel they need to be settled. So they often come home for a reason that isn't because they want to come home. They come home because their parents aren't well, or because the children need to go to high school and they want a particular school, or because the children are going to university. So there's mixed emotions, and most of the people back home are completely clueless.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so one of the things that happens in repatriation and expatriation, but also in repatriation, is that you go through this honeymoon period where everybody's happy to see you and, you're just so thrilled and everything's rainbows and unicorns. And then suddenly there's that cultural shift when you realize, I'm back where I belong. Have you any suggestions for people who may be going through repatriation as to how they can gently connect themselves and their lives in a functional way with the people that they love back home, whom they have left and now return to. How should they think about this?
I think on a practical level, they get home and it's simple, like opening a bank account.
Yes.
My grandson came and visited last year from the UK, so we said, oh, we'll go to the bank and open a bank account. We went to the bank and they said, you don't open bank accounts here, you do it all online.
Yeah.
I'm going, what's the point of a bank if you can't open a bank account? So, so they could have been away, that all happened over COVID, that
Yes.
everything, you didn't go to the bank. So I think there's a little bit of humility, and that humility, sharing that humility of, hey, I have no clue how to do this.
Yes.
Then helps the locals realize, oh, okay, maybe
Yes.
there's a lot more to cope with. So I think being humble, asking for help of the right people, being selective. You're not going to ask the dizzy person to help you with the bank. You're going to ask the one that's really good with paperwork, and make it, look, I'm asking you because you have always been good at this. So could you help me? And people want to help. They want to help you get settled. And then I guess you have to ask questions about, so how do you all gather now? Because when you went, maybe everybody had a roast dinner on Sunday afternoon and everybody saw everybody, but now the kids are playing sport and this and that, and we don't do that any longer. So you have to say, well, what does everybody do now? How do you do it?
So you have to be willing to be schooled. You have to be willing to be retrained. And it's a little awkward when you think that, well, I grew up here, I should know how to do this, right?
I could well imagine that would be really awful. And then you think, man, I've got to host these things sometimes. I can't even think how you would feed 25 people based on what I see in the supermarket. I can't even think about that right now. So I think being humble, being open, don't try and be cleverer than you are. You're tired, you're worn out, there's a lot to think about. There's new roads, new motorways,
Yes.
all that sort of thing. But I guess one of the things is not to knock everything at home, because nobody wants to hear that. You're just going to, just as you had dealt with it in your foreign locations, that you soon learned it wasn't a good idea to criticize the way things are done locally. Probably doesn't pay to criticize how things are done at home, even if they are better done in another place. Those are kept to yourself.
Yeah, those are very practical, down to earth, common sense, understandable strategies that I think can really make any repatriation or any arrival much more inviting and interesting. Yes. So thank you for those. One other question. One of the things we talked about was treating home like a new location. Do you have some ideas of how you can do that? It really takes a switch in the mindset. It takes a switch in the thinking. How do you talk to people about that?
I think that what they need to probably do is do what they did at all the other locations. And that is have three groups of friends. You've got your old friends that you rekindle, your old local friends, and then you've got your family. But you need to create your expat friends, mix and mingle with people who've done what you've done. So find the tribes that you're used to mixing with.
Excellent.
And so I think that's probably, just do exactly what you've done that has worked in other locations, and don't treat it as don't expect it to be like it was before you left. And for sure, when you head to that sideline of the soccer game, it's not hard, because you're naturally attracted to someone with an accent, and
Yes.
because they're in the same boat with
Yes.
you.
Yes.
And when you tell them, well, I used to live here 10 years ago and now I've come back and I
Yes.
feel like a
Yeah.
foreigner, they go, oh, we're in
Yes.
the same boat. So I think that would
Yes.
keep their new identity, or their identity that they've evolved over the years alive and kicking, and not getting all rusty and covered in cobwebs. They need to keep that identity, that global mobility identity, moving and alive, and find some new connections that can do that, and keep in touch with all the friends that, of course, you've made overseas, which is so much easier these days. And the good ones won't matter. It won't matter if they don't hear from you for 2 months. The good ones will always be there.
Exactly. I call that making yourself adoptable.
Yes, that's so important.
Make yourself, be aware enough so that you make yourself adoptable. Well, Helen, thank you for this conversation about repatriation in the special repatriation series for Nomadic Diaries. Tell us where people can find you online, please. And we will include it in the show notes for our listeners.
Okay, you can find me at distancefamilies.com. So that's distance with a C-E in it, not a T. Distancefamilies.com. There's lots of articles there that I share, ways to connect via social media, and a link to the book series that I have written. Thank you.
And we highly recommend. I have been listening to Helen's book series on Audible, and it is very sweet and very pragmatic, and is full of really great guidance. And I'm really enjoying it. Thank you so much, Helen. Thank you for this interview. Thank you for your time. But most of all, thank you for following the inspiration to be a champion for distant grandparent families. Thank you.
Thank you very much for this opportunity. I appreciate it.